Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Christopher Plonker. I am in the Lakeville Finance Committee Chair. I've called this meeting tonight on March 17th. Apologies for the delay. We had some technical issues that LakeCAM has resolved for us. For the meeting for tonight, I've extended the invitation to the Lakeville Select Board, as well as the Freetown Finance Committee. And representing the Freetown Finance Committee is the Chair, Margaret French. The invitation was also extended to the Freetown Select Board. I don't believe any members are currently participating. In addition, I also invited the Lakeville Freetown Lakeville School Committee, and representing the Freetown Lakeville School Committee is the chair, Mr. John Burke, as well as Crystal Ing. Also, the Lakeville Town Administrator, Andrew Sukforth, is also participating in the meeting tonight. Oh, sorry, along with Lakeville Select Board member Maureen Candido, as well as Leah Fabian. For the Lakeville Finance Committee, at the moment, I don't have a quorum. I just lost one of my members. Hopefully she'll be coming back. Okay, I do have a quorum. Okay, having a quorum noted. Barbara Mankowski's on in the meeting, as well as Larry Kostat, and myself, again, Chair Christopher Plonker. Also wanted to note also that the Lakeville Town Accountant, Mike Ellis, is also on the line. I think that covers everybody. Did I miss anybody? Okay, good. Okay, so with that, I will entertain a motion to open this Finance Committee meeting.
So
Motion to
moved.
open.
All right. Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Okay, with that, the purpose of
Mr.
tonight.
Chairman, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I'm sorry. This is Jose from LakeCAM. Could you mention that the link to this meeting from Zoom and the password and meeting ID are on Facebook?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
If the
Yeah.
public wants to join the Zoom meeting, they can through that link or those credentials. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Apologies. The Zoom link in the posted meeting notice was not working. However, again, as LakeCAM just noted, if you're watching this through Facebook, the link has also been posted on the Facebook link, correct, Jose? Along with the meeting ID and password. Did I get that right?
This is Zoom meeting, correct?
Right. The Zoom meeting credentials, if anybody wants to join the Zoom meeting instead of just watching it through Facebook. Okay, and with that, also Carol Lees has also joined us, and she is a Freetown Finance Committee member. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is for Mr. Jack Higgins, who is the Freetown Lakeville Regional School District Business Manager. Did I get that right, Jack? Along as interim superintendent, acting superintendent, many hats. So Jack has offered to present the fiscal year 26 regional school district budget. We're just gonna, I think, Jack, I'm just gonna ask you, let's start with maybe just a quick summary.
Yep.
We'll turn it over to you if you can share, and then, we're not gonna go into a line by line review of the budget.
Sure.
If anybody's interested, that is currently occurring right now during the school committee meetings. We've already had 2 of those, and I think we have 1 more scheduled, Jack. Is that correct?
Correct. We have the hearing at the next meeting, and we'll review the last little bits in the schools, which we had gone through all the salaries in the schools on the first one.
Correct. Right. And that'll be followed, John, correct me if I'm wrong, with a public hearing at the end of the month on the 26th for the public.
Right.
Yes, we're talking about the same meeting.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The 26th is the next meeting. Okay. Got it. So that'd be a final wrap up and then kind of like the public hearing as well. Okay. That's right.
Correct.
Okay. Again, so with that, I will turn it over to Jack. If you could just give us a summary. I know there's been some adjustments over the last few weeks, especially the adjustments, to the overall budget as well as to the town's assessment. I just want to publicly acknowledge the work that the school as well as the school committee, have been doing to address our concerns with the cost of the budget and the related assessment. So they've been working hard to make those necessary adjustments to help both towns. So we appreciate that. So with that, the latest assessment we received was on March 6th. I know there was one after that, Jack. There was no change to our assessment. The last one that we received by email was on March 6th, and for my committee, I sent that out on March 7th. I know there was a little bit of adjustment after that, no impact to our assessment. So with that, Jack, again, thank you for your time tonight. I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. I'll take you through a little short history if you don't mind. So the FY25 budget was $46,550,959. When we sat down to begin the process of creating the FY26 budget, the primary concerns that we had were understanding that we were about to embark into negotiations with our teachers, our paraprofessionals, and our secretaries in an environment where those negotiations have been challenging across the Commonwealth from the information we had gathered. So we started the process in the middle of November, actually closer to the beginning of November. I met with all of the directors and principals to discuss their current budget, their 25 budget, and the things that they could be expecting in 26. Specifically, that we were going to be looking to tighten the belt on as many expenses outside of salaries because we understood that there was going to be these negotiations coming forward. So the initial 26 budget presented had no additions to it other than the additions that existed as a result of fixed costs, primarily health insurance, which we'll get back into in a moment. But the initial budget was presented in February, at the beginning of February, to the school committee, and it had a 5.5% increase on the overall budget. It was $49,135,217. We had several meetings with the town administrators as well as the town accountants in following that. This has been the process that we've been going through as the three acting superintendents, myself, Terry Fleming, and Kelly Steele, to just make connections with the towns, but also then after the budget it became a budget focused conversations, and understanding what the financial needs and restrictions and limitations are for the towns in this particular time. The same limitations we're all generally seeing as a result of tightening of reduction in many cases of some federal dollars, and understanding where we are. So at the first round we saw a round of we were able to identify about $500,000 worth of reductions. This was mostly out of new information that we had received after we had presented the budget, specifically some cuts in or some reductions in out-of-district tuition. We also had done a projection for the teachers' salaries, teachers' paras, and secretary salaries. So we were able to find some savings once we locked in to the specific 3%, but understanding that a 3% increase would only occur for those people at the top step. Those people in the middle of the steps would see both an increase in lane as well as steps, so they could see an increase of closer to like 6 or 7% in their salaries. So that first presentation was a review of those things that we had identified, savings that would have happened as a matter of course, that new information came in after the budget had been completed before that first presentation. Obviously, in our conversations, the towns identified that the amount of assessment that could be supported was going to be lower than even that. So we understood we do have, as a result of enrollment reductions, some need to reduce our staffing. At first approach, we have 8 staff members that we identify would need to be reduced just simply due to enrollment. But that's obviously wouldn't even be enough as well. So we then looked at further staff reductions in order to meet the needs of the towns. We're at about 16. That number has a little bit of flexibility depending on who ultimately which staff members are reduced or RIFed, let go, and whether or not they also have health insurance. Those things could in the case of a staff member that has family health insurance, this school district could be on the has an additional $19,000 approximately on top of salary for a newer teacher who's on a 60-40 percentage split, but at the family plan in the upcoming year. So that's why there's some variation in terms of, for just straight salary, it would be 16 staff members that we're looking at. That was presented to to the town administrators, to the heads of the finance committee in that assessment that you received. That was the $47,575,033, which makes an assessment increase for Lakeville of $726,649, and actually an assessment decrease for Freetown of $5,231. And the reason for that is because of the fact that the minimum required local contribution for Lakeville increased pretty significantly in this year by the state as a result of the measurements that they use. I don't have I can gather that information, but quite honestly, explaining their calculation is a little bit beyond my ability at this point. But understanding that the minimum contribution number that they have shared is about a 6 to 7%, closer to 7% increase from last year. Whereas in the case of Freetown, their minimum contribution increase was less than 3%. So those minimum contributions right there took a big chunk out of what was going to be required. And that's why there's a disparity between the two. I will share, though, that this is on a year-by-year basis, can have some flexibility and some fluctuation. In FY23, the opposite was true. The value of the assessment increase for Freetown was greater than the assessment increase for Lakeville. And I think for the same reason. So that new budget number of $47,575,000 that I mentioned, that's an increase of 2.2% from last year's budget. As I mentioned, that's a result of essentially the staff reduction of between 14 and 16 positions, depending on the link of health insurance with those positions. But that being said, then that after I had sent that out, I had received some additional information from some of the lobbying groups and professional organizations that are specifically involved with regional schools. So MARS, Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, is promoting and working very hard to get the legislature and the governor to, not only in 26 but in 25, to appropriate more of the millionaire surtax to the schools, specifically to regional schools, because of the lack of full funding for regional transportation. In 2021, Freetown Lakeville established a regional transportation fund, stabilization fund, as is the ability for all regional schools. So the idea would be that potentially the state could be we could be receiving additional funds in the current year that would bring us up to closer to 100% for the current year. But that we've already funded. We already know where we are for the current year, so we could use some of that money to carry over into next year. To essentially, the hope would be, in the conversation with the school committee, would be to save some of these positions, knowing that we're not going to save all of them. We wouldn't want to. We need a reduction, as I said, of about 8 positions due to due to enrollment. But there are a couple positions that specifically a school adjustment counselor at the middle school that we've been lobbying for several years, 10 years as far as I know. I've been here this is my 11th year. And this is the first year we've been able to have the additional adjustment counseling service at the middle school. That's our largest school with 700 students enrolled. And if under these cuts, that would be one of the positions that would be lost. So that would certainly be at the top of the list if we did find additional funding to be able to save a position like that. So what I'm suggesting is that we have a time crunch between the district voting a budget number that they can't vote higher, but they can vote down, and the time between that time and the time where the towns are voting on at their town meeting. And in between it's we have reason to believe that the state will be providing some additional funding, both in FY25 and potentially the promise of additional funding in FY26 through Chapter 70. Though that number is going to be not very big. That's about $75,000. But we could see a regional transportation bump this year of maybe 300 to 325,000 if their percentages they're talking about are accurate. So what I had proposed and proposing to the school committee is that the school committee allots additional $400,000 in the assessment from school choice as a placeholder between the vote on April 9th and the time in mid-May when we're getting close to town meeting where we would have that opportunity to utilize maybe if the state did provide that funding. Ultimately, if we got to the middle of May and we did not see the state funding, the scenarios would be like this. The first scenario would be the state would come back and say, we've read all the tea leaves and there's no additional funding coming. The school committee would vote the final number of the $47,575,033 and would vote that the school choice money, that $400,000 placeholder, would be moved back into our school choice funding. This would therefore obviously not adjust the assessment to the towns. It would remain the same. If we include the placeholder or we remove the placeholder, the assessment's the same. The budget goes up, but then the district's funding would also go up to the same amount. Scenario 2 that's possible would be that the state would provide not the full 400,000 that I'm seeing as some of the conversation, but maybe 200,000, 300,000, pick a number, but let's say half of that number. The school district would then, the school committee would vote the budget at $200,000 less than that, or $200,000 more than the $47,575, and remove all $400,000 from the school choice and move them back into the fund. And then we would have to make some decisions relative to that $200,000 and what positions could be saved. The other possibility would be, and this could happen because they're talking about some additional funding in a number of different places. Another one is circuit breaker and some other things in 25 that we saw a little bit more. We still wouldn't go above that 400, but any dollar over that number would reduce the assessment to the towns. We'd have that 400 and we reduce the assessment to the towns. And we would be able to, as we've seen it, there would be about 5 to 6 positions that we would like to hold on to between those, as I mentioned, some of those positions that were added that have been a real benefit. And in one case, we have a teaching position that we know we're receiving a retirement in a similar field in a year. And so if we were able to hold that position, we would be able to see that savings in a year. But those are elements of the discussion that we're having right now. If we were to vote if the school committee was to vote utilizing the 400,000 as that placeholder, that number would be 47,975,033, and which would be a 3.1% increase in the budget from last year. That's all I have.
Hey, Jack. Okay, so I'll open it up to questions. Go ahead, Margaret.
Jack, after the vote at the last school committee, where the interim superintendent is coming in on April 1st, what if she decides she doesn't want to lower that budget number?
I would suggest to you that I've had conversations with the incoming superintendent to make her aware of where we are.
And she's in agreement?
Yes, but I mean, I don't speak for her. But
okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Barbara Mankowski, Lakeville. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I would like to know if obviously you spent a lot of time on this. What is our exposure if we have changes from the federal government with respect to the Department of Education? Do we have vulnerabilities, or do we have a plan for how to deal with that?
So we do. I mean, it would be impossible to say that we don't. We receive approximately $1.25 million from the feds in IDEA grant as well as in the title grants. It's our two primary grant funding comes from the IDEA grant of approximately between 750 and 850, depending on 850,000, depending on the year. And then our title grant is in and around 400,000. Title I is in and around 400,000. The other titles 2, 3, and 4 are small, tens of thousands in total. But yes, I mean, so quite honestly, it puts us in a very difficult spot. So what's our exposure is we would have to go. Class sizes would obviously increase dramatically. I mean, it would be not possible for us to absorb a $1.25 million reduction in those funding sources without it affecting the way we offer and we provide our instruction.
What departments do you think that would specifically impact? I know that federal government goes to special education. So would it in fact have a direct impact on IEP services?
We would try very much for it not to, but understanding that it would, all scenarios would have to be considered. Because the IDEA grant funding is specifically for special education funding, wouldn't necessarily mean that we would reduce the services by that amount. It would mean that we would want to spread out the effect across all areas, though that is a decision that a school committee and a superintendent are going to be making, along with my support in terms of what the recommendations would be. But it's certainly something we have to concern ourselves with. We have some exposure. Obviously, you can look around where we would be among the smaller ones relative to our neighbors.
Okay, I guess my concern is without having some idea, to go. Obviously, we don't want to lose those services. I have a child who needs those services, so I'm real sensitive to that. We would have to. That would be a serious consideration to approving an override without understanding how that's going to play out for the kids, because we certainly don't want to see those services decline.
Sure.
But it is problematic because we don't know what that exposure is. So that's why I'm asking the question. Certainly,
and I share with you that it is something that we are talking about, and we are looking at scenarios. In conversations and through listservs with other directors of finance and business managers, we also are looking for some guidance from the state, because ultimately, if what they're talking about is making cuts to these programs, then the idea would be that the state would be taking over some, if not all, of that funding. But certainly, obviously, that would be very challenging to do in a year.
Okay.
But I share your concern.
Yeah, I guess, when you do a budget, you're looking forward and saying, this is what we project is going to happen. And as with any business, when you have some sort of a serious bump or shift in that, it can seriously impact, sort of that downstream impact, which the following year is not just a one hit, it's like a double hit, right?
Right.
So, my concern is we're looking forward and we're talking about giving raises, right? And which I think is well deserved. And I know we need quality of teachers and so forth. But my concern is if we don't have that safety net for the essentials, which I consider IEPs an essential, that we become vulnerable for another override next year.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And we would, so to understand, the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, is not the only oversight in terms of us making sure that we're providing the services required through the IEP. It's also through the state of Massachusetts. So certainly we would be providing the services on all IEPs. But ultimately, what would end up happening, right, is that it would be affecting other places within the school district, and could see larger class sizes, which affects the way that we are delivering instruction. An IEP is not going to say that a student has to be, well, it could in some cases where they might be in a small group math or a small group reading course. But a standard inclusion IEP student it would identify that they would be in a supported environment with a teacher and a special education teacher in an inclusion classroom, and they would also have an academic support outside of that as well on their schedule and working with a special education teacher. If you're talking about as a result of cuts coming from the federal government that class sizes go from 23 to 33, you can see how the IEP is still being met, but it's obviously affecting the way that we're providing the instruction.
Okay. It's my understanding that the cuts may be in a place where where the private classes are sort of separate. We have some kids that are going into separate classrooms, right? That they may have to be reintegrated. Do you have any thoughts on that? If we would be looking at
I don't think we would do that. Really is only occurring in the case of students with substantially separate restrictions in their IEP. They would continue to be in the substantially separate program. It's in our middle school and our high school where we have students who are in just small groups for some of their instruction, for math and for ELA primarily. So in the short term, no, I wouldn't see us making that change.
Okay.
But each year, if we were to have it each year and we didn't have access to the same kind of funding, we would certainly have to make some tough decisions. Though it has been very effective within the school district, particularly at the middle school and high school, having these programs. So we would certainly like to keep them.
You mentioned that you had some challenges with your negotiations with teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, so I shared with you that we went into it assuming that we were going to have some challenges given the information that we had received from other towns. So where we are with negotiations is that we have met with some tentative agreements on a number of smaller issues, but really it's coming down to raises. Our staff has shared with us that they are fully aware that they are among the lowest paid in the state and certainly among the lowest paid locally. Quite honestly, we are among the lowest budget school districts per pupil expenditure in the state. We are 273 out of 284 in terms of the expenditure per pupil in the state of Massachusetts. Now, there are more than 284 school entities, but that's excluding charter schools and excluding vocational school districts. Just regular run-of-the-mill regional school districts and municipal school districts. We're 200 and as I said, we're 273 out of 284.
Well, that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I mean, when you say we have a 6 to 7%, somewhere between 3 and 7% for increases, of course, that raises eyebrows.
Sure.
But being ranked 273rd out of 284 it's embarrassing. But we definitely, I'm going to, not keep chatting about this, but I definitely think we've got some very serious concerns about, the budget. My concern is it's going to look a lot different next year than it does this year. And we will have given these people a raise and approved an override only to find out that we're in a hotter mess in 12 months. So, thank you all. Stop chatting.
Thank you, Barbara. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just had a couple questions. When we were talking about the cuts earlier, Barbara was making some great points. On the cuts in general, are these all like educator and student facing cuts, or are these administrative cuts?
These are staff, teacher facing or student facing as a result of enrollment decreases that we've seen on the top end and the bottom end of our.
Understood about the enrollment one, but as for the 16 additional that you had referenced that could be impacted.
8 additional.
8 additional that could be impacted. Are those student-facing ones, or are we really focusing on administrative ones where they're, if it comes to the worst case scenario where it's interruption into business, but not into the teachers and the children as much?
So it is teachers, and the additional positions are positions that were added, and in some cases were funded through ESSER funding up until the beginning of this year. And so we would be adopting them or essentially bringing them, next year is the first year they'd be fully brought on to the general fund. So that's part of the reason why some of those were chosen.
Okay, so how many positions were funded by ESSER funds?
3, and then there were 2 positions that were added last year after the budget was closed. That was a float nurse and the school adjustment counselor moved from a single, so it wasn't a new position, it was a movement from high school. So just the float nurse was the additional position.
Okay, and then my question would be, have you looked at not that I want anyone, this is just to be clear, I'm looking at a no-lose situation, but everything is a lose-lose when it's coming to budget crunch time. Have you made every effort to look where that happens, where the rubber meets the road? Because again, funding the children's services and funding the education and that's a priority.
Sure.
I'm saying it for me personally. I'm not speaking for anyone else, but that's a priority. And whenever I hear of cuts, I never hear of the administrative cuts. I really hear about the teacher cuts. So I'm just wondering what it is you've been working with or where you're at with your staffing that wouldn't make that part of it.
So we have looked at all of those things, and we can continue. We can go look back at those as well. Our administrative cuts, we have really pretty low administrative costs compared to our colleagues around the area, but certainly something we can look into. The administrative cuts would have to be in places where, I don't think it would make sense to cut any of our building administrators. We're pretty lean there now. In terms of central office administration, we have the 4 lead people, the superintendent, the 3 directors who are currently serving as the acting superintendents. We have special education coordinators that are assisting in quite honestly bringing the services to the students as well. So there's a lot of family face-to-face experience with those positions as well. We have a director of technology. We have a director of facilities. So we don't have a great amount of administration in this district. And if we did lose those positions, quite honestly, we'd have a difficulty.
Understood. I just want to make sure that if teachers should be the last in the last line of to go, in my opinion, and only speaking for myself, as far as that goes. Also, have you looked at any shared services agreements, like as far as if you were to cut any administrative positions, is there something you could have a shared service with one of the towns with in order to save money, or anything, trying to get into the nitty-gritty of being really surgical about, what it is they can offer. I don't want to see any of this happen. I can say I'm not overly surprised after last year's budget to see some anomalies bubble up this year, because I know there was a lot of unknowns that had happened the year before. Were you able to, do you have an update on the E&D number as it sits currently for your?
Sure. Let me just have it right here. Let me just grab it.
Thanks.
So the current E&D for FY25 is $2,211,690.70.
Okay, and it's been over 2 million for the last 3 years now, right? As it rolls.
I believe the year before, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Those are my questions for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Anybody else? Any additional questions?
Yeah. Hi,
Yeah.
Jack. It's Crystal.
Sure.
I have a question. As far as the scheduler in the special ed office,
Mhm.
why? That's been an ongoing question I have as to why we have someone who is a scheduler. My job now is special education, and I work with gigantic districts, Boston, Fall River. I get sent days to pick on a calendar and a calendar link. Why aren't we using that technology rather than having an actual person? To me, that seems like, I don't want to see anybody lose their job, but I would rather keep a teacher rather than a job that could be done through the internet. You guys use Google. Google has bookings. The administrators could set out a bookings link, because that's what I do when anybody needs to talk to me. You can go and you can book time with me. So like I said, that's at least 50 grand a year plus benefits. That to me is a lot of money. I would rather see a teacher, and I would certainly rather see that position at the middle school stay.
The adjustment counselor.
The adjustment counselor, absolutely. And also, I've been having a big problem with the 4 psychologists, knowing that they're $90,000 a year. We've
Well,
never had 4 before. I understand the 30 days.
Hold on,
I understand that.
Can I just share with you
Okay.
that we did hire the 4th one this year, who is not at 90, who's at the minimum, is at under 55. It's a first year. And that's less than what we spent last year in contracted services for psych services.
Right. But psychologists they don't actually have to administer all of the other special ed tests. They only have to do, the functional behavioral and the, oh God, I'm drawing a blank here, functional behavioral and the neuropsych. Whereas, as I spoke to some special education teachers, they can actually administer those tests. So again, I would rather see the teachers rather than, another psychologist.
Okay. There was a reference in the chat to the director making $300,000 per year. The special education director is making under $120,000 a year. All of the special education administrators, the coordinator, and the director are all in the same line. That's why that number is where it is. It's not one person.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to add in one quick statistic for the group that I just looked up. You mentioned you have a new teacher starting under $50,000 a year.
Yes.
That is a very low income category for the town of Freetown. It's even lower for Lakeville. And I'm in the mortgage business. A customer like that would be in really deep trouble. So a salary under $50,000 with a college degree is disappointing at best. I wish I could show you. 100% area median income is 113.2 for the town of Freetown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Yes.
Good.
Hi, Carolise. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Yeah.
First, I would like to say thank you for all your hard work. There's no doubt that this is a difficult budget season. And I really feel that you put a lot of attention to the towns to try to balance everything with everyone. I'd like to focus my energy on the revenue side in hopes to find something there.
Sure.
My questions are, do you know what your projected fund balance might be for circuit breaker when we get to the end of this fiscal year, and also for school choice?
I do. Hold on one second. I am right here. Okay. So our circuit breaker is at the end of this year will be about 1.1 million. I can give you
Okay.
the hard numbers, but it's about 1.1 million for circuit breaker at the end of this year. Though that number might fluctuate because they are talking about additional funding in the current year, with not unlike we did last year, where I'm not sure if it happened in all districts, but there was extraordinary relief funding that was sent out to all the districts that didn't have, it was really without strings attached. It was additional funding that they had that they distributed out. So it was about 260,000 that we received last year. Don't hold me to that number, but it was somewhere between 240 and 260. And the hope is that some of that is going to happen this year as well, because certainly that would help us with next year, with some flexibility in terms of the funding came in this year. We'd have that. And then for school choice, we are about just a little over $1 million at the end of this year.
Okay.
Okay, with the currently allotted of 800,000 in the assessment. I think if you have a copy of the assessment of utilizing 800,000 for next year, we would expect to probably increase our school choice next year to get it close to $300,000 in the year, because we opened up a number of seats at the lower levels, and those lower levels are the places where they quickly fill.
Okay. So my question in relation to circuit breaker is when we look at the assessment sheet, it says a use of fund balance of 400,000, but if
Yep.
you're going to 1.1 million left, and believe me, I know I don't want to like drain your circuit breaker fund, but so my question was, well, first I'll state, you know, of course I'm thinking like, how does the fund balance relate to the use of the fund balance on the assessment sheet? And the other is, I've seen on the FY25 payment schedule that the reimbursement to Freetown Lakeville in this year that we're in is 1,490,206. That is without extraordinary relief.
Right.
So I want to make sure that you see the same numbers I see on your end, and that it's all sort of feeding in to the assessment sheet in a way that will help not only the towns, but I'm hoping obviously to save staff if we ultimately could do that.
Absolutely. So in the FY26 assessment draft, you have the 119,206. That's the remaining from the current year, because in the current year we're also using 300 from the in next year we would be using 1.190206. That is remaining from the reimbursement we're getting this year. 300,000 is being used in the current year.
So that's the 1190 is really the use of the fund balance piece.
Correct. For next year.
Because of how it reads on the assessment sheet.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Okay. So it is the yes, correct. I apologize. So the 119,206 is what's remaining would be remaining from the reimbursement in the current year for next year. And
Okay.
then 400,000 is is part of what we're expecting for next year.
Yeah.
So we're expecting about 1.5 next year. And so we're going to be using $400,000 of that in that year as well.
And then of course you'd hope to carry another 1.1 available for potentially next year, or in case there's an emergency expenditure coming up.
Yes, and cross our fingers that there's additional percentage coming this year that we could then be, ultimately, if we got additional dollars out of the surtax in the current year, then we would be able to not have to use we'd be able to use less of next year's reimbursement.
And for the extraordinary relief, it looks like, is there an application process, or it's not like it's automatic?
No. So in this case, so I just mentioned the extraordinary relief from last year. So there was no application last year. They simply just reached out and said, there's additional funding, here you go. What I'm talking about is the current lobbying being done that is with the expectation that there would be some additional funds coming out of that surtax going out to the regional schools, maybe to all the schools, but for regional schools for transportation, and then circuit breaker, as well as additional funds for McKinney-Vento, and maybe even they're asking for non-resident vocational tuition as well, which would actually benefit, in this case, would benefit potentially Lakeville, who has a couple of students going out to Norfolk Aggie, and it's pretty expensive because they're, out of district.
I did see something posted for claims for extraordinary relief are due on March 28th, 2025. It says
Yep.
that districts are eligible, but only if their tuition for instruction for out of district increased 25% or more from the prior year. And I'm not sure if you guys are in that category.
Not. So that we are not. So, and I apologize because last year's the extraordinary relief that I'm talking about from last year, it was separate from what you normally get from extraordinary relief. There were two paths you could take, or one path they were offering the money, again, essentially, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but no strings attached. It didn't require you to fill anything out. The other piece of it was that if you wanted to have extraordinary relief, you could also receive additional dollars, but then that would reduce the reimbursement for the following year, which is what would happen if we were to get extraordinary relief in this year, outside of that additional like one-time payment that we received. And I think that was, my understanding in the reading that I did and the few conversations that I had when I came in over the summer, with a gentleman I think you're probably familiar with, Jay Sullivan, that explained that that funding was additional funding that the state had in circuit breaker that they needed to spend and they needed to send out to the school districts. And so that's how we got that chunk of money.
And it sounds like you've really tweaked your out of district expenditures on the budget side, that you've amended the budget to accommodate for that. I know it's a tough balancing act because you don't know the unknown.
Right. But that's what circuit breaker is for, right? Is for those unforeseen issues that arise, and with the fear that you don't get stuck in a situation where you're overdrawn because of it. But your fear is, of course, is that you're losing that cushion if you have to utilize it.
And so for school choice, it seems that you're using about half of your projected fund balance really to fund next year's budget.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realize there's a balance to that as well.
Yes. And what I'm also looking down the road is that we have a number of retirements next year. We were, quite honestly, I was hoping that we were going to be able to get through this year. But it's the perfect storm, right? Everybody's having tight budgets, and we're a year away from about a half a dozen of pretty expensive retirements that in some cases as a result of enrollment, we may not need, through attrition, we may not need to replace. But quite honestly, if we're bringing them in, we're talking about people coming in at much lower rates. We could save significantly in there too.
I did have one more question, but on the expenditure side, and I'm sure it's something you're working hard to address. And I'm looking more at the current year that we're in and in relation to payroll. Seems like there may have been a number of positions that were hired above and beyond the budget that we have this year for the 24-25 school year. My question was, are there now position controls in place to prevent that from happening going forward?
Yes. Well, the position control is, I'm here, quite honestly. We had a search situation where, as you know, we didn't have anybody in this position after May 15th, I think it was. And there wasn't a lot of communication around it. So yes, but the controls are a result of significant measurement of what we actually have for expenditure. Now we have a very good idea of what those things are. I can tell you within a few dollars of what our expenditures are going to be with regard to payroll for next year, with a plus or minus because of maybe some people moving on, people staying, and so forth. But I know that wasn't quite as closely monitored at the end of last year.
And then my last question is, do you have a projected E&D for the end of this year at this point? Or is that a project?
I don't at this time. I will say that my going through this in my first year, what I'm doing to manage and to project is I'm going back through to 2016 and comparing the percentage of our expenditures in the current year to all the years going back. And we're in line for the most part with those things. One of the things that's we've done a nice job of is the district accountant this year has been really on top of encumbering as many things as we possibly can. So projecting out so that we can have a pretty good idea of where we are throughout the year. And I know that when I look at some of the previous years, salaries weren't encumbered, and now we're encumbering salaries too. So it's helpful for us to understand where we are. But expenditure, just pure expenditure as percentage of the budget, as a measurement for the past, as I said, past 8 years or so, we are in a line with those things. We are doing better than some years. We're doing a little worse than some years, but by percentage points, one plus and minus 1 or 2.
Great. Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Just one. I don't know if I saw anything for capital plans for the next year's budget for any projects.
There's no capital plans in the current budget. We have reached out for a couple of small projects that we have here on the campus. Last year, we were able to benefit from some additional earmark funding coming from the state for the Assawamsett playground, as well as security upgrades in all the buildings. We received $175,000 through those 2 grant earmarks coming from the state. And so I had, through the webinars and meetings that I'm participating in, I had discovered that there's the likelihood of additional earmarks in the current year. So I've already reached out for some of the items that potentially we may need in the current year. For example, our track here on the campus is 10 years old and it needs to be resealed. The fear would be that if we don't take care of it now, that we're going to have an issue that we're going to have to replace it if we're not careful. So that would be one thing. And then there's when that track was redone 10 years ago, those the long jump pits and the triple jump pits, those were not replaced. So those are 25 to 30 years old. And so we've spoken to get an estimate on what that would cost to bring those up to modernize them. And then I've reached out to our contacts through those earmarks as potentially a way to fund it.
Jack, could I ask about Chromebooks? What is the expiration and the replacement plan on that? They're expiring soon, right? Some of them.
So they're on a rotation. Some of them are expiring, but the tech director has done a nice job of putting them on a cycle so that we're not staring at the replacement of, half or 3/4 of them at one time. But it is something that we have to consider and understand what the expectations would be. So there's also some conversations, around how can we maximize our use of Chromebooks in other environments other than one-to-one.
Are at least some of the replacements in next year's budget under hardware or?
No, only because we did a big replacement this past summer through the ESSER funds.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Sure. We actually did like 1.5 of the cycles with some of that remaining ESSER funds last summer.
All right, great.
Yep.
Okay, any more questions?
Chris, I always have one more question.
Of course, Barbara, go ahead.
Guys, I am the newbie to the block, so I fully apologize for asking stupid questions and taking up everybody's time. But when I look at the budget, obviously we have come in under budget by 5%, 5.25. Is that correct?
Under budget. What do you mean?
Yes, we came in. So the budget was, we ended up 5.2. The percentage of budget was 5.25.
The
So it
budget
looks like-
increase initially was 5.5-ish, and the new number is 2.2.
Okay, so I'm sorry, that's for the current year. I'm talking about last year. We had an excess.
Oh,
Right.
okay. Yep.
Right. So when we have excess, how are those funds applied? They go into the next year?
No. So what happens in the case of regional school districts is that only 5% of the next budget. So when we close out the current year, whatever additional expenditure or whatever additional funding we have in our general fund at the end of the year is then put into essentially into the totally certified unencumbered excess and deficiency. That number then has, if it's our new budget number, that 47,575 or the 47,975, depending on how we approach it with the additional state funding, 5% of that is the maximum amount that can remain in excess and deficiency for the following year. So if the remaining funds, when added to what we currently have in excess and deficiency, if they go over that 5%, the money is returned to the towns. There's actually two choices. The towns can have it returned to them in the form of a check, or it can be used to reduce the assessment in the following year.
Okay, when are your final numbers finished for fiscal 24?
We've finished fiscal 24.
Sorry, we're in so we already know what the numbers were. So that 5.25% is over the 5% threshold. So that excess of 0.25 would be refunded back to the town.
Which already was, yeah. The towns received a refund of $746,304 split between the two towns.
Told you I had stupid questions. Thank you very much.
That's all right. Thank you.
That's a good question, Barbara. It's good. We're all learning. And Jack is a great guy. So I do want to note that, Jack, we appreciate your clarity in your responses to the answers. Barbara and I have been attending all the meetings, multiple emails that we've been forwarding up from our committees and so forth. So we do appreciate your prompt responses and your clarity in responses. We greatly appreciate it too, Jack.
If I'm clear in my responses, Chris, it's only because I'm just figuring it out and I'm explaining how I just learned it.
No, don't give away your secrets, Jack. We're like, hey, Jack, he knows it all. Don't give away your secrets. So thank you again. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Well,
come on, Karen.
One more. Health insurance, does that include any plan design changes, Jack, or just a renewal?
Excuse me. Under the current, so at this point, we are a little bit under the gun. Sorry, there's a bigger story here. So we budgeted originally for the expectation of around 11-12%. It came in a little under that, 10.5%. So we did have a little bit of savings and that was part of that original $500,000 that we were able to find, in reduction. We do have the possibility of plans change. Call it a lane change. It would be a small increase in our I'm sorry. I want to say deductions, but that's not the word I want to use. No. Annual. I'm sorry. It'll come to me, but slightly more expensive plan to the users, and would reduce the percentage increase by about half, which would be great because particularly, obviously given this budget situation, but also given the fact that we are in negotiation with the teachers, we could potentially use some of that savings for part of the raises and we could make this work a little bit easier. But the problem that we have there is it's not just through negotiations. It's not quite as simple as having a negotiation and doing it. We have to go through the PEC process. So we are in that process now. Both groups are, primarily identifying who will be a representative from each one of the unions, also who is going to be the retirement representative for that. And it's not quite as simple as saying, hey, let's pick him, her, and her. There has to be a little bit more sort of open dialogue around it. We have a soft deadline of April 1st to make that change and a hard deadline of May 1st. Obviously, it's before May 1st because that's when open enrollment starts. But we're told that if you can get it done, the week before, we're hoping to get it done before that. We had some good conversations around it, and for those of our staff members that are on the 60-40 split, the change in the cost would actually be still a reduction for them. Whereas those in the 75-25, they would see if they were deductible. Sorry, the word I was looking for is deductible. Mm-hmm. So their deductible would in fact surpass the savings if they use it, right? It would only be if they fully use the deductible. So, in those negotiations, we're having conversations around that about how we could best make this work and potentially use some of that savings to help pay the teachers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kara. Any more questions?
Excuse me.
Okay, so before I entertain a motion to adjourn, John, if you could just tell us in the public the key dates that are coming out. I know there's a meeting tomorrow night, there's one next week, and then the date that the school committee will be voting on the budget, please.
Sure thing. We have a meeting of the Regional Finance Committee tomorrow, Apponequet Library, starting at 6. The following Wednesday, which would be the 26th of March, also starting at 6, is the next meeting of the Regional School Committee.
Right, and important to note that you guys are also kind of calling that a public hearing too, right? For the budget.
That is correct, Chris.
Okay. And then the following week, you vote, I believe, correct?
The next scheduled meeting after that will be the 9th.
Right, which is when the school committee does the formal vote on the budget.
That is correct, I believe.
Yep.
If you don't mind, Chris, I'll jump in. There's just to add one piece to what John was saying. So the meeting tomorrow night, the Regional Finance Subcommittee tomorrow's meeting would be their recommendation of the budget.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay.
Thank you, Jack.
Can I just
Yeah,
mention
Margaret.
one thing, Chris?
Sure.
Last year, the vote on the budget was scheduled for April 3rd, and the election was April 1st. So there was a big thing about having an emergency meeting on the 1st to vote for the budget before the new people came in. So the people that worked, the committee members that worked on the budget could vote on the budget. This year, the election is on the 7th and the vote is scheduled for the 9th. So it's the same situation.
Yep.
Do you plan on having 2 new members vote on this budget, or are you going to try and move that?
Currently, there is not a plan to move the meeting.
Okay. Has anybody been, both candidates are running unopposed, so we can kind of assume they will be voted in. Has anybody reached out to talk to them so they know what they're voting on?
We have not yet.
Okay.
Margaret, I certainly can do that.
Thank you, Jack. It just seems,
Can I?
yeah, go ahead.
It's Crystal. I did reach out to Tim when I saw him at the last meeting, Jack, and I told him to contact you to get a copy of the budget, but I did not reach out to Melinda.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I can contact them both and just invite them. I mean, I'll give them whatever they would like, and then it's a link, as you guys have. I think hopefully everybody has the link to the digital version as well, because I've sent it out. But also, I'd be happy to have them come in and sit down and talk to them about it.
Great. Thanks, Jack.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So with that, again, I want to extend my appreciation for Mr. Jack Higgins for his time tonight, as well as the members of the Lakeville Select Board, the Freetown Finance Committee, my committee, the Lakeville Finance Committee, Town Administrator, Mr. Sukforth, who else? Town Accountant Mike Ellis, and representatives, of course, from our school committee, including the chair, Mr. John Burke. So thank you again, everybody, for your time, for this opportunity to review the budget tonight. Again, I encourage members to continue to attend those school committee meetings that John referenced, Regional Finance Subcommittee meeting tomorrow night, school committee meeting next week, and then, of course, the important vote on April 9th. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this Finance Committee meeting.
So moved, Larry Foster.
Thank you, Larry. The
I'll
second?
second Larry.
Thank you, Barbara. So all those in favor of adjourning the Finance Committee meeting?
Roll call vote.
Sorry.
Austin, aye.
Okay.
Roll call vote, Peter.
Oh, roll call. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
Austin, aye.
Barbara, I.
And Chris Plunker, aye. So that's 3. Motion carries. And again, thanks again to LakeCAM for resolving those technical difficulties at the beginning of the meeting. Always appreciate their support. Jose, are we good to go?
Yes.
Great. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.